The investigation into the Capitol Hill riot continues, and the sheer size of the case, it is staggering. Justice Department says it's the most complex investigation ever handled, with more than 400 ongoing criminal cases, 300 suspects facing charges, and the FBI receiving more than 250,000 tips. The Bureau using a massive amount of digital technology to catch the rioters. And a recent piece in the Washington Post describes it, and I'm going to speak to the writer in a minute, but first, let me quote from that article. The FBI using license plate readers that captured suspects' cars on the way to Washington, cell tower location records that chronicled their movements through the Capitol complex, facial recognition searches that matched images to suspects' driver's licenses or social media profiles, and a remarkably deep catalog of video from surveillance systems, live streams, news reports, and cameras worn by the police. The Post, they focused on one couple from Pittsburgh who were there, showing all the different shots of them gathered from both videos posted online and security cameras at the Capitol. You have civil liberties groups, though, they're warning that when police use all of this technology, it does infringe on the privacy rights of Americans, and some of these techniques have resulted in lawsuits arguing it is unconstitutional for the government to track people. Let's bring in the co-author of that Washington Post article, technology reporter Drew Harwell. He joins us now. Drew, thank you.
Thank you.
You know, reading your piece that you put together with your colleague Craig Timberg, part of me felt great that the FBI and law enforcement has all these tools to go after people for a horrific day. But then when you follow the breadcrumbs about how they got to people and so easily, you wonder how far this could go. But am I asking the wrong question? Isn't the horse out of the barn? We may never have had a debate in this country about privacy rights, but it kind of has already been resolved whether we like it or not.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, the horse is out of the barn in terms of our rights of privacy, the amount of surveillance that the police can use, but that horse still has a long way to run, you know, and these systems are always expanding, always evolving. And that's what you saw with the Capitol case, you know, whether you feel good or bad or about a lot of these people being imprisoned. And, you know, this was a huge crime with, you know, people died amid it. These systems watch all of us, right? And you know, this was such a great reminder that no matter what kind of social cause you support, no matter where you go, you're always kind of under watch by somebody. And it's kind of amazing how precise and how deep that data can really go.
You know, you went into some specific examples in there, but one, a single phone led to 12,000 pages of evidence. Give an idea to the audience about how, with one piece of technological evidence, how it could spawn into something so far-reaching.
You know, our phones are our lives, right? I mean, my phone certainly has a lot about me, photos, contacts, texts, and not just that, but the stuff you don't see, the metadata and the location details of where you've gone. And so one phone, plug it into a device that the police use to unlock locked phones, copy everything that's on there, ended up spewing out 12,000 pages of records, and, you know, even more in terms of Facebook and the other apps. And so, you know, that's what was kind of shocking to me. Even somebody who covers surveillance full time was seeing really the just sheer volume of data that is gathered about us and held by these private companies who are, you know, likely to share it with law enforcement if they ask. And so, you know, one phone, you could tell from a lot of these people, I could see exactly where they went in the Capitol, according to the FBI. I could see, you know, when they got to Washington and when they left. In some cases, the FBI was even able to track back people to the hotels or the Airbnbs where they stayed, because they could see where their little phone location blip was or where their car was parked. And so a ton of data about people that they have no idea that they're giving off, and have no idea until it's too late that it's already kind of implicated them in this crime.
You know, Drew, when I saw that a lot of the connective tissue to that day was facial recognition, I just assumed, oh, well, they got a picture of the person, they ran it through the databases, and they found a mugshot of somebody or whatever else. They connected some of these to people's applications for a driver's license, et cetera. And it gets you to thinking, you could be on any camera walking down any major city right now, and you may not have any criminal record, but they'll be able to basically connect the dots about your life.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's what is really kind of scary about facial recognition. We've never really had something that identifies us whenever we go outside, knows where we're going, what path we took there. And, we're kind of still at the real ground level of facial recognition. The police really only use it in some limited ways. There's even some bans by cities that don't let their police use it. But, we're getting to the point where all of social media has been scraped. A lot of social media has been scraped, and you can connect a lot of these images to people's profiles. Like you said, I mean, there were cases where somebody had applied for a passport years ago, and that photo was still in the system by some local or federal government, and their facial recognition search was able to connect them right from that application, 5 years ago to the image on the surveillance camera in January. And so, for that kind of thing, it's scary when it's accurate. It's also kind of scary when it's inaccurate. It's impossible not to be photographed, right, out in the real world, right? And so many of us have photos on social media now. How are those going to be connected, and could they be used against us? That's a big question.
Drew, a couple of years ago, I was doing a story about a major bridge was being rebuilt in the New York metropolitan area, and they had gotten rid of the toll booths, and instead they were having the digital readers. And it was a small part of the story, but it started to unspool a little bit because every car that was going across was being photographed, and all the license plate readers that were going on as well. And I said, wow, that's a lot of power to be held by the Department of Transportation, the Thruway Authority, whatever the case may be. But the more you dug into it, private companies were providing these resources gratis to the states or municipalities under the proviso that they could also get that data that was being acquired. So when you cross a bridge, what I was learning was a private company was keeping my data. Now, somebody said you could have a private investigator, let's say if there's some contentious divorce, and all of a sudden, if you pay a fee, you'll be able to find out the whereabouts, let's say, of a spouse or whatever else. I don't think people have fully grasped how much of this is in the private sector, not just at the public level. And, we talk about privacy. There's a commercial aspect to this, too, that's pretty chilling.
Yeah, that's such a good point. There are so many overlaps in terms of private data and public data that we just either don't have any insight into, or there's no court oversight over. Only the police who use it know about it, or only the private vendors who use it know about it. And yet, it's tracking our locations in ways that we never really expected. And yeah, like you said, there are a couple companies that run big databases full of license plate locations. So if you drive over that bridge, it knows exactly the second that you drove over. Are you going northbound, southbound, that kind of thing? And, get enough of those cameras and you can establish pretty much the breadcrumb trail for where you're going. In a lot of these capital arrests, there were, for one person's car, there were a dozen photos of them driving from New York to DC. They had no idea. And so, yeah, I mean, the public governments have these set up, for red light cameras, speed cameras, toll booths, bridges, overpasses, that kind of thing. All of that data goes into these big databases. There's billions of license plate detections now, and there's really not much people can do about it, right? You're in public, you can't hide your license plate. And so, these things have been around for a couple of years, but we're only really starting to understand what that's really doing to your privacy in a public setting. You already don't really have too much, but now the fact that your travel is being logged, how could that be used against you, right? I mean, if you're going, and where we go is a really sensitive thing. If you're going to a church, if you're going to a hospital for some sort of medical screening, all of that information is very sensitive. You may not want somebody to be able to track you that closely, but that's what this technology allows people to do. And
one of the things you get from Drew's piece is, listen, I hopefully, an overwhelming majority of us want to have the book thrown at people who perpetrated those horrible crimes on January 6th. But before they even got to Washington. The vast amount of information that was being acquired on them without a warrant and without even a crime being committed. Now, was it contributory to bringing them to justice? It seems that way. But what about the rest of us? And where does it go? And again, I'll end this conversation where we started. These decisions may already have been made for us in many ways, and maybe it's long overdue we at least have the conversation, albeit a little bit late in the game. Drew Harwell, I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And coming up next, as the battle over transgender rights continues in this country, we're going to show you one Republican from a deep red state who's actually trying to protect this population. We'll also put a human face on the issue by showing you parents talking about their transgender kids and explaining why they need our government's help.